Bonjour, welcome, bienvenue, Guinawea. Welcome to our inaugural FishCAST Fall 2023 seminar series. I'm so excited to see you all. I'm so excited for the start of this amazing series that we've put on for you. My name is Christina Semenuk. For those of you who don't know, I am the director of FishCAST. This is an NSERC-funded program for training the next generation of aquatic scientists in inclusive partnerships. I'm addressing you, and I'm looking towards my window because I'm addressing you all from Wawaitanang, or the river bends, also known as Windsor, where FishCAST is primarily administered. And we're on the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy, and this includes the Ojibwa, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi peoples. I said that we're kind of in a training program of inclusive partnership, and what I mean by that is that our FishCAST community, we recognize the importance and we value reciprocal relationships between Indigenous peoples, local knowledge holders, place, land, and of course the water. And the journey that our trainees are going on as part of our FishCAST community, it's not a linear one, but it's a circular one. And we hope that it's going to be interweaving multiple ways of knowing and multiple ways of doing. FishCAST is a community, it's not just all about the research, but it's about the FishCAST seminar series that we hold. And so through our micro-credentials, through the partnerships that we engage in, our goal is to work towards a more decolonial approach to the research that we do. And we are also trying to grow the capacity to be able to address the systemic barriers that we encounter in our fields and to work hopefully and collaboratively to overcome them. And so we're doing all of this because as treaty land inhabitants, this is our shared history. These are our shared values, and these are our shared futures together. And I'm so excited to be on this journey with you all. So thank you, miigwech, merci tout le monde. And it is now my pleasure to hand this over, and you don't have to hear me speak anymore, to hand this over to Lauren Damphouse. She's a fellow FishCAST trainee who will be making the more formal introduction. So Lauren, whenever you're ready.
Okay, hi everyone. As Tina just mentioned, I'm the one introducing Kelly today, and it is a pleasure. As you might have already read, Kelly is an aquatic science biologist with Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and she works out of the Great Lakes Lab for Fisheries and Aquatic Sciences in Burlington. Kelly has over 20 years of experience working with freshwater mussels in Ontario, and her research interests include the life cycle, lifespan, and distribution of these organisms, as well as their host fishes and aquatic ecosystems. Kelly received her undergraduate in marine and freshwater biology from the University of Guelph and her master's in integrated biology from the University of Guelph as well. And she's also a member of the Mollusk Specialist Subcommittee of COSEWIC, the Freshwater Mollusk Conservation Society, FishCAST Recruitment, Mobility, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Indigeneity Committee, as well as the GLLFAS Schwimm team. And I've personally been so lucky to know Kelly and have her as one of my mentors for the last 2 years. She's an amazing scientist, as well as just an incredibly nice person who has always been so generous with her time and knowledge. When I first met Kelly in person, it was to attend the annual Ontario Freshwater Mollusk Identification Workshop, which she co-teaches and will be entering its 20th year next year. And I'll also be seeing her next month at the Canadian Freshwater Mollusk Research Meeting, of which Kelly is a founder and organizing member. I can't say enough good things about her, but I'll let Kelly speak for herself. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Lauren, and thank you, Christina and Kendra, for asking me to present today. I am so excited to be here, and I just think that this FishCAST program is phenomenal, and I am very honored to be a speaker in this series, so thank you. So I'm going to share my screen now, and hopefully it will be the right one, and then I will start my presentation. And I won't be able to see all of your lovely faces while I'm presenting, so I hope I don't look weird or anything. So bear with me on that. Can someone let me know if you can see my mouse going here?
I can see your slide. Can we see the mouse scrolling around?
Yeah, we can see it here, Kelly.
Okay, great.
And it's full screen, and it looks good on our end.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very, very much. So to begin, I would like to just let you know that I am coming to you today from the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, or Burlington, Ontario. And I just want to acknowledge the deep relationship that First Nations and Métis have with our aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems. And I am so grateful and thankful to be able to work in these every day. And I'm also looking forward to continuing my personal journey to learning about this and understanding it so that I can have a positive role in making the concepts of truth and reconciliation come to fruition. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about mussel trails. So I hope that you can all see in this picture, it's a picture of substrate, and in it you can see all of these little mussel trails. So this is the analogy that I'm going to use today, and I hope that, or my goal for this talk is that everyone can take something away from it, even if it's just a little tiny piece of information. So I wasn't quite sure what to present on, so I had a wonderful meeting with Kendra and Christina, and then I also got some feedback from Lauren as well. So thanks to all of you for doing that. And so what I decided to do was sort of start at the beginning and the end. So the end product that we're all hoping for from a science perspective is finishing off that master's or that PhD, or finishing off that big report, or getting that primary publication. And when you look at these end results, a lot of times I feel like people looking at them think that the progression was this nice linear. Everything went perfectly. None of your fish died. You had the perfect number of replicates. Your R code worked. And for me, I don't find that that is generally the case. What I find is it is more like a mussel trail. And so just to give you a little bit of information again on this picture, all of these mussel trails, we see these a lot when we're working in clear water with softer substrate. But in this instance here, you can see that there's not a whole lot of water in the area. So you get these mussel trails going this way and that way and curling back on themselves. And sometimes I feel like a mussel trying to find deep water in a drought condition, because I may not go the right way at first, but I want to figure out how I can make something or the end product successful. So that's sort of how I'm coming at this presentation today. And to begin that, I thought maybe I should introduce myself. Thank you again, Lauren, for your introduction. But aside from an aquatic science biologist, I am a whole lot of other things. I have 2 kids. I love basketball. I love the holiday season. I am a new dog owner, so we were sharing dog stories at the beginning when we got online here this afternoon. So there's a lot of other pieces to me, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of an intro on that before we get to the aquatic science biologist part. So I come from a small town north of Kingston, and my parents in 1989 started McNichols Electrical and Plumbing. So I come from electrical and plumbing background. I'm the only person in my family who does not work with family business, but this is my family. And each of them have taught me such important things throughout life. So I just want to quickly go through some little tidbits and share them with you, and hopefully they resonate with you as they did with me. So this is my mom, Janice, in her lovely Christmas pajamas. My mom did not have an easy childhood. There was a lot of challenges, and because of that, she is such a very good mom. And she always says, life is short, so enjoy it. So even when things get stressful, you know, you've got to get this R code written, you've got to get your paper out, you've got to do this field work, just try and remember to take a little step back and try and find the positives in it. So because life is short, and so we want to enjoy these things. My dad has given me, all of these people, I should say, have given me tons of information and little tidbits throughout my life and my career. But one of my favorites was my dad. I called him when I was doing my master's thesis, and I was so upset. Nothing was going right. And he said, Kelly, okay. He said, you're trying to write your whole thesis at once. You can't do that. He said, it's very much like wiring a house. It's a big job to get all those lights on, but in the end, it's a whole bunch of little jobs put together. So that has really stuck with me, especially when I am struggling to get something done at the moment. I'm like, okay, let's break this down. Let's make it small so that I can be successful and then move forward. Another thing he has said that I try and emulate as a supervisor is that you have to take care of the people that you work with, because if you don't have the people, it's very hard to get things done. So that's a big one that I try and practice every single day. Now, my sister Amy is 4 years younger than I am. But very early on in life, she would tell me, it's okay to not be okay. So feel those feelings and, acknowledge them, and you will feel better. Give yourself a break. It's okay to not be okay. And finally, my brother, Joey, who is 8 years younger than me, but I have way more hair. He runs the business now. He bought that from my parents, and he says that you have to be honest with people. And he said you can never go wrong if you have an honest conversation. And this does not mean that these conversations are easy. Some of the most honest or courageous conversations I have ever had have been the hardest ones I've had in my life.
Is the actual,
So so
actual
that's something that I try and keep close to my heart as well. But of course, a lot of you might be interested in the aquatic science biologist. And I am going to get into more of that. But for now, I just want to show up some pictures. I do love my job. I do really love mussels. I'm super fortunate in that. But what I want to tell you first is, how did I actually get here? What was my path? And believe it or not, it started in grade 3 with Jaws 3, the movie. And so in this movie, there were 2 dolphins, Cindy and Sandy, and in my mind, they basically saved the day. And that was it. I was completely hooked. I was going to become a marine biologist and swim with the dolphins, the whales, and the sharks. So the time came for me to apply to university, and I realized that I was a bit of a homebody. So my plan originally was to go to a coast, but that's really, really far from my small town of Westport. So I decided to go to the University of Guelph, and my plan was to spend 2 years there and then head out to a coast once I was used to being away from home. Well, that plan all got kiboshed when I met this man, Dr. Jerry Mackey, who is a well-known malacologist. He's one of the, he knows zebra mussels, he knows unionid mussels, or clams, as some of you may know them, and pea clams. So those tiny little ones that you see a lot in rivers and lakes around here. And he was so passionate about this topic, he passed it on to me. So I love mussels, and here are some pictures of some of them. And many of you might ask why. So if you thought you were going to get away from not actually having to listen about mussels during my talk, surprise, I'm going to talk about mussels. Why do I think these little critters are absolutely amazing? Well, they are benthic burrowing filter feeders. They cycle nutrients, they filter water, and they do all of that for free, which in this day and age, it's really hard to find anything for free. So I really appreciate their efforts. Not only that, but they do it. Oh, what have I done here? Oh, there we go. They are pretty much sedentary as adults. So they do all of this work in our aquatic ecosystems without moving very much throughout their entire life cycle as adults. Let's see if I can move this on. There we go. Next, they provide habitat for a number of little critters while they're alive and when they're dead and their shells remain. They are prey for other animals, so they transfer energy from the aquatic ecosystem to the terrestrial one. They are very long-lived. On the shorter end, you're probably looking at 10 to 15 years, but on the upper end, you're looking at 80 to 100 years. And we've aged one individual in our lab at 92 years old. So that's pretty cool. And then finally, from a personal perspective, Southwestern Ontario is the hotspot for mussel biodiversity, not only in the province of Ontario, but all across Canada. So me being a homebody and not wanting to be more than 4 hours from my family, this worked out very nicely. The last reason why I think they're so cool is they have this amazing life cycle. So freshwater mussels are parasitic on a host. Generally, that host is a fish. And I put up some pictures here so that you can see some of these lures. So some species of females, excuse me, let me start that. Some species have developed luring techniques to actually lure the fish species that they need closer to them. So what you're seeing in these pictures is the shell of the mussel is burrowed, and sitting on top or extruding from that shell is actual tissue. It's called mantle tissue from the mussel. And what she does is she actively pulsates those lures, and a fish comes down and takes a little bite of it. And when they do, she releases her larvae or glaucidia onto the fish species. And hopefully it's the right fish species and they swim away to live happily or to develop. But some of these females and some of these species, such as this one here, Epioblasma trichetra, the snuff box mussel, have gone a step further. And so what you see here is a female mussel sitting in the substrate, and just the posterior portion is sticking out. So that's the spot where the siphons are. And the host species for this mussel is the log perch. And log perch flip over rocks while they are looking for food. So flipping over rocks and boom, all of a sudden this fish gets captured by a mussel. So if you don't find this cool, maybe you're not meant to love mussels like I do, but this is pretty incredible that a sedentary animal can actually capture a fish. There's all kinds of evolutionary implications in this as well. But because of the length of time my talk is, I'm going to leave it at that for my mussels are cool. Happy to always chat about mussels. So if you have questions about them, we can go over that at the end. But that is why I love mussels so much. And they were introduced to me during my undergraduate degree. And that is where I first worked for a graduate student working on freshwater mussels. So of course, then I finished my undergraduate degree. So now we're going back to my path and how I got here. And after I graduated, I was completely terrified. I had bills to pay. So I worked at the mall, I worked at Indigo and American Eagle. I did those part-time so that I could still get some experience in biology. So I worked at the Ontario Vet College in the wildlife clinic. I worked at the West Nile virus clinic, dissecting birds and sending tissues off to see if they had West Nile. And then I also went up to Elliott Lake in Northern Ontario, where I worked on wood turtles. So I was very much, again, like that mussel, trying to find deeper water. And I was trying out different things. And sometimes I would move to the side and sometimes I would backtrack. But I knew that I wanted to be in biology and aquatic biology. So I always, any door that was open to me, I tried to take. And then about a year after I graduated, after bouncing around from various contracts and the mall jobs, Dr. Mackey still had funding left over for the mussel project in his lab. And because I had worked for his graduate student, Dalen will know, when she was doing her master's, I was very invested, and obviously I loved mussels. He said, "We still have some funding. Would you like to run it as a technician?" So I competed for the job and I got it. And then I spent the next 8 years working on the life cycle of freshwater mussels, and specifically trying to figure out which host species endangered mussels need to complete their life cycle. So I did that for Dr. Mackey until he retired, and then for Dr. Joseph Ackerman until 2010. So I had a lot of opportunities while I was there. I was young. I had a lot of energy. I didn't have anything to tie me down. And one of the most important things I did, and remember, I graduated from my undergrad degree in 2001. And then in 2004, the opportunity came up for me to actually do a master's on a project, mussel project, that very much interested me. And so this was one of the best things that I did for my career and moving it forward. My path was slightly different than a lot of people's because I decided to do it part-time. Because at the time I still wanted to work, and that's what worked for me. And it wasn't easy. And I wish, going through, there were times when I felt like, wow, I am not smart enough to do this. I think I should just quit. And then I spoke to some other friends who were doing their masters at the same time, and I found out that they felt the same way. So there's something, making that connection with other people and finding out you have, similar feelings, there's something very comforting about it, and it can give you that extra boost to move forward and keep going. And so that's really, during that time, the project was great. It was hard, it was difficult, but I was super happy when I was finally successful and finished it. And some of that was because I reached out to some friends going through the same thing and heard about their experiences. So again, a lot of time during my contract at the University of Guelph, I was not doing my master's. So super busy, 2004 to 2006. The other times, the other years I was working, I still tried to dabble in a few things because I still wasn't quite sure where I fit. So I volunteered at the Hagen Aqua Lab, which is on campus at the University of Guelph. I went down to the Bahamas for a month. Now, keep in mind, I was much younger than I am now. So again, a lot of energy, no attachments. And so my weekends, I would work, I would do some consulting work to see if that was a path I wanted to follow. I was able to do some contract writing with Fisheries and Oceans Canada to see if that was something that I wanted to follow. And really, I just used my vacation time and my weekends to figure out what else was out there. So once again, you know, that mussel bumping into areas where there were no waters and turning around and going back. So I feel like I did a lot of that throughout my career, and especially my early career when I was trying to figure out where I fit. So then in 2010, my life completely changed, and talk about a winding road. I had my son, and that was incredible. I spent a year on mat leave with him. And then in 2011, I was hired by Dr. Todd Morris, who is a mussel research scientist. So he's the head of our lab, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. And that's because of Todd and his ability to support his staff, and also because of the work and the people that we get to work with. So I have been doing that. I was a technician from 2011 to 2016 with a very short break to have my daughter well, I guess it was a year, but in 2014. And then in 2016, I got the biologist position in the lab, and I have been here ever since. So that's sort of the path that I took to get here. As I said, I tried a lot of different things to figure out what I liked, what I didn't like. I worked for a lot of people to figure out what I liked in supervisors and what I wanted to be as a supervisor, and also some things that I didn't want to be as a supervisor. And those were all really, really important to me. So now, as an aquatic science biologist with DFO Science, I have this job where there's a field component, there's a lab component, there's an office component, and some outreach as well. And that's one of the things that I love about this job, because there's such a variety. So I just briefly want to go through each of these so that you get a little bit of a taste of what I actually do and what the mussel lab does here. When we're in the field, typically we have a large field component. It lasts all summer. We are looking at distributions, abundances, and densities of the freshwater mussel community as a whole. And again, keep in mind that Southwestern Ontario is the hotspot for mussel biodiversity, and that means there's a lot of species at risk mussels here. So although our lab focuses on species at risk mussels, we always do community assessments because it's so important. We often monitor sites. We've got a monitoring network, which you can see up here in the top right, 54 sites that we try and get back to in 7 different watersheds. Sometimes we're exploring new sites. Sometimes we're doing specific projects on life history characteristics. And then other times we are fortunate enough to have the opportunity to go and help out graduate students. And that's something that we got to do this past summer with Lauren's project. And that's just down here, the small picture on the right. And so, of course, then we can look at all of this information. We can figure out where these animals are found. We can look at densities and trends through time at a site, at a water body level, at a species level. So there's all kinds of different things that we can do that stems from this field component in the lab. Next, of course, there's some lab work that always goes on. And I had mentioned previously that we had aged a 92-year-old individual. That was a purple warty-back. This photo is not that purple warty-back. It was much bigger. But when you're doing aging and using shells, and again, I don't go into the details here. It's really neat stuff. But you can start getting at the lifespan of these animals. And then you can do some calculations to figure out age at first maturity. And all of these life history characteristics are super important for understanding the animal and ultimately conserving it as well. So that's where our lab work comes into play. A lot of times we process samples that we brought in from our field work. So whether it's looking for the presence of sperm in an individual mussel or the presence of eggs or glaucidia, measuring glaucidia, we've done all kinds of things depending on the particular project that's been funded in a given year. In the office, there's a lot more office stuff than I thought when I first got into this role. But that's okay. I have learned and I have grown. One of our favorite things and one of the things that we do is maintain the Lower Great Lakes Union database. So this contains almost 25,000 records of freshwater mussels across mostly Ontario, but we're starting to get connections in other provinces across the country. So we're putting those in as well. We write and review documents. We provide science advice to managers. We work with SARA permit data. We participate in recovery actions. We attend meetings. And also there are a ton of government processes. So although when we get to roles, especially in the federal government, and that's been my experience, is that you have, what you were trained for in science and that, but then there's a whole other level of process that you have to learn and become comfortable with when you work in the government, whether it's purchasing equipment or coding credit card purchases or getting approvals. There's a lot of government process as well that is built into these positions. And then outreach, and thanks to Lauren, because she already mentioned a couple of these for me, and that's perfect. And here's a shameless plug for our upcoming Canadian Freshwater Mollusk Research Meeting. It's going to be held November 15th and 16th here in Burlington. So if anybody is interested in that, please let me know and I can send out the information. This will be our 5th meeting, and the goal with this is to try and bring together mollusk research partners, collaborators from across the country to figure out and to learn about what interesting mollusk research has been completed over the last 2 years. So we're super excited about that. The Ontario Freshwater Mussel Identification Workshop, number 20, is coming up next year, and that's super exciting. We sometimes get to attend conferences such as the Freshwater Mollusk Conservation Society. We developed the clam counter app with the Toronto Zoo. So if you don't have that yet, it's got a list of all of the mussels in Canada. It's a national app. It is free to download on Android and iOS devices. So feel free to do that. You can use it as a key to identify mussels, or you can report mussels there as well. And then we get to do fun presentations like this. So that is sort of what I do in a nutshell. And now I sort of want to pass on some things that I have learned. And there are 8 things that are really big in my mind. And this is the first one. There is nothing you can do about high water level. So this is specific to me. High water level really dampens our spirits. Most of our mussel work is wadable. So when the water level increases, we cannot put our chest waders on and go in and look for mussels. Because it's not safe. And safety is a very, very important part of field work. So when I was early on in my career, things like this hydrograph I would not sleep for days because I was so worried about it. And since then, I have learned with practice, there's nothing I can do about this. So if there's something you can't control, if it's related to Mother Nature, then let it go. Focus on things you can control. Now, when I see this, I think of it as an opportunity to get some of that office stuff done that I've been putting off. I wish that I had believed my sister earlier on in my career. She always said this, and I never thought, and I never really believed it until I got a little bit more into my career when I was like, okay, I need to feel these feelings because once I feel them and acknowledge them, I can move on. They might still be there, but I know that they mean something. So let's deal with that. And then let's figure out how I can move forward. Number 3, and this is something that I talk with my kids a lot about, and sometimes I have to remember it myself, is mistakes are a way of learning. It doesn't signify a huge, massive failure. And this is something that took me a long time to learn. Mistakes are how we learn. When I make a mistake now, I figure out what I can do better so that it doesn't happen again in the future. So it is definitely a learning experience. Try to find a coping mechanism. In other words, it's okay to cry. I run, nap, sometimes go to counseling. There's lots of healthy coping mechanisms that are out there. So try and find one that works for you. And I have no problem saying that I was planning a big project this last summer and I had to have a solid, ugly cry because my brain was going 50 different directions and I couldn't focus on one thing. So I had my cry. I was at home at the time. I was working at home. I had my cry and then I got back to business because once I let that out, I acknowledged the feeling. I was able to focus again. And that is something that has taken me a long time to learn. So if any of you can, if any of you have ever felt the same way, I'm with you. You are not alone. Step outside your comfort zone. And this is going to be different for everyone. I'm going to share my experiences with you. I used to be terrified to ask questions in a group setting. And, if I was involved in a review, I put everything on paper and then I did it by email. But then I was put in a situation where I had to ask questions because I was responsible for it. And so although in my mind, they may have sounded silly, something like, am I doing the paperwork for this? I had to ask that question because if I was supposed to be doing the paperwork and I didn't know, it wouldn't get done. So definitely that was one of the things that I have worked on and practicing it. And that is something that I bet my supervisor Todd could tell you that I have changed as I've been with DFO from the beginning in 2011 until now, because I do speak up in meetings and ask those questions. Backing up a trailer, we don't do a lot of boat work when we work in wadeable waters. And so sometimes we go out and we practice backing up the trailer in the boats because that is something that we want to keep up and keep practicing. And another one of mine was to present as much as possible. And I will say that it helps if you share these things with your supervisor because then they can tell you have to do them. And that really gives you that push to do it. And so I used to be very, very nervous when I was presenting, and I still do get nervous. And so I've had some great conversations with my supervisor and then also my son, who is now 13. And a few years ago, he was so excited to present. And I said, wow, I'm so impressed. You don't seem nervous at all. And he said, why would I be nervous? And I said, well, I don't know. I get nervous when I present. And he said, Mom, I've done so much work and learned so much on this topic. I can't wait to tell my classmates about it. And so I find that is now how I try and approach the presentations because, wow, what a great and positive way to think about it instead of all the nerves that are churning in your stomach. Number 6 is just be kind. And it may sound like a simple thing, but everyone is struggling or has some kind of challenge they are overcoming. And I know for me, if I'm having a bad day and I'm walking down the hall and someone smiles at me, completely changes my outlook for the day. So that's another one that I find is a big one, and it's simple. Number 7 is work hard because people definitely notice. There is nothing I like more than to walk into the lab and see a summer student or staff sweeping the floor because they've realized that we were busy and we couldn't give them another task to do. So they took that initiative and they started sweeping the floor. Let me tell you, our lab can always be cleaned. And people will notice that. That is something that I immediately write down for future reference. And then finally, and this is what I want to spend the rest of my talk on, is the Government of Canada Public Jobs website. Tips for the process. So I hope that all of you have gone online and you've created an account on this website. And if you haven't, I recommend that you do, especially as you progress, as you get your undergraduate degrees and your master's degrees. And when I first thought of putting this in here, I wasn't, it was just going to be a very small section, but then I reached out to our division manager and one of the leads for our summer hiring program, and they gave me all of this information to share with you. So to Lynn and Bill, I just want to say thank you very much. So one of the first things that they said was make sure you have an account on the government job portal and that you sign up for those notifications. So you can look at the jobs for biologists, for example, and you can click a button and say, okay, when a biologist job comes up, I want to get an email about it. And that will save you a ton of time. So that's the first one. The second one is to apply to as many positions as possible and go through the process. These are processes. They are long, they are involved. And if you get a little bit of experience going through the process, when that job comes up that you really, really want, you'll have a better understanding of the process. So that is not what is preventing you from getting that position. Time. And this is a big one. These competitions take a lot of time. Don't wait until 9 o'clock of the day of the deadline to start filling these things out. It can take hours. When they want examples, they want examples. And study, especially if it's a written exam. These competitions are not easy. You have to prepare for them. So if they say knowledge of Great Lakes, study, get up on your Great Lakes information. Because they're not, just name the Great Lakes. They are more involved. Another thing is to tailor your resume to the position. Make sure that you highlight those areas that are directly related to that position and use the same wording. Don't be afraid to cut and paste those criteria into your resume or your cover letter. Grammar, and this is straight from our division manager's email. Grammar and spelling matter. So do not use run-on sentences. Start your paragraphs with leading sentences. And if you're doing the cover letter, what those sentences might want to be are exactly what is in the job posting. Something simple, and the person does not have to be in your field. You can ask someone to review your resume and cover letter for errors. Oftentimes, the ability to communicate in writing is a common criteria in all of these competitions. Sometimes they ask you for specific examples about that, and other times they don't. They will just use what you've written for your other answers as a way to assess for your ability to communicate in writing. A lot of these jobs, all of these jobs have essential criteria or qualifications, and some of them have asset criteria and qualifications. You must meet the essential criteria in the statement of merit. So in that job description, in what they are looking for, you have to meet those essential ones. If you don't meet them, you will not get screened in. So I'm not saying you should lie. Never stretch the truth, because it will come out ultimately that you don't have those experiences. But important things that I have found, and I have seen a lot of people do, is to not forget to include your life experiences when you're answering these. I find that sometimes when we're applying for jobs, we get so wrapped up in the job that we forget that we have all of these life experiences. So if a job says one of the criteria is you must have 2 years of budgeting experience. Well, I haven't done that in my role, but I'm an adult. I put myself through school. I have a house. I have kids. I budget all the time, not just money, right? Time. There's a lot of things. So make sure you're thinking about those and pulling those into these answers as well. And then read the questions carefully. And this is super important. If the question is something like, give us an example of when you've done field work and analyzed data and presented. Don't just say, oh, I completed my master's between 2004 to 2006. Because if it's not written down, the assessors cannot assess it. So write down that you did field work using these methods in this river from this month to this month for 2 years. And then maybe you used R or Excel to analyze and organize your data. And then you presented it using histograms or whatever the case may be. And you had to defend all of this at your thesis defense or an undergraduate conference or event. Don't forget about bringing those things into it, and always read the question carefully. Don't undersell yourself. And sometimes I find this is really hard to do. A lot of the people that I know are very humble and do not like to talk themselves up. But the hiring managers want to know what you contributed to a project. They don't want to know what the team did. They want to know what you did. So, just say, I'm awesome. I did this, this, and this. Look online, do some research online, look at personal suitability questions and that kind of thing, because if you see them, if you can practice them, it will help. And as you're practicing them, don't just practice them in your brain, practice them out loud. Make it second nature, talking about these topics and these examples that you have, because the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And that's just like anything else in life. Take time to organize your thoughts. A lot of times we get jumbled when we're in these situations. So if you are allowed a pen and a paper, write down those main points so that you have an organized answer. Very simple one, confirm with your references that they will actually provide a good reference for you. And it also doesn't hurt to give them a heads up that it might be coming. These competitions can take a very long time, so make sure that you follow up. If there's an email, keep it, and don't be afraid to follow up and ask that question. Is this still going on? That kind of thing. And then watch for and follow deadlines. So examples with the federal government is you need to get security clearance. And if you're doing field work, you need to get a medical. Those can take a very long time to get. So as soon as you get notification, make those appointments as quickly as you can. And then finally, don't give up. And that's a big thing, I think, with anything in life, is persevere, find the best in yourself and be happy. And ultimately, to bring it all back around, find your deeper water, find it where you belong, but it may not be a straight path, and that's okay. And with that, I will say thank you very much. And I'm take any questions if there's time.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Miigwech, merci beaucoup. It was such a great talk. I just want to give you another round of applause. I think it was amazing how you shared your career experience, your life experience, and you came from a very personal and vulnerable point. And so I really, really appreciate you being so open with us and for sharing that to that much depth. And I've taken in so much as well, and we can all share on those multiple points. So thank you. Thank you for your courage in talking about things that we should be talking about all the time. And I think that was amazing. I so appreciate it. I'd love to turn this over now to the